Hello, I'm Dr. Stanley Sandler. This is my podcast, Stan the History Man. Today, I'd like to talk about a subject that's not too familiar called mandatory Palestine. And this is the period when the British ruled Palestine. And I'll tell you how it happened and how it wound up. The Turks made a very, very bad decision in 1914. They decided to go with the Germans rather than the Allies. And they're tough fighters. They fought right to the end of the war against the British and the French, especially the Gallipoli catastrophe. The British had to leave um, that part of Turkey, and so at the end of the war, you lose the war, you're going to lose something. The Turks lost all of their empire. Well, they were backed up into basically what is called European Turkey. And so all the territories, Iraq, Palestine, Lebanon, this was all Turkish territory, was allocated to the Allies. Now, it used to be in the old days they'd be colonies; they just take them over, and but not, colonialism had a bad name, especially Woodrow Wilson. He said people should have a right to make the rest of use what kind of government they want. So what they did, the League of Nations uh, put the British in charge of Palestine, the former Turkish province of Palestine, and the French in part of Syria and Lebanon. And so they took over basically control of Palestine in 1920. There were actually British troops there keeping order because things were rather chaotic at the end of the war. Well, in many ways, things never got very unchaotic because Arabs and Jews are in Palestine by this time. As a matter of fact, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration in 1917 saying that we look with favor upon the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. And then the provisor, the rights of the indigenous inhabitants are to be respected. That means kick all the Arabs out and put the Jews in. So what happened was the British were between the Jews and the Arabs, and both of them didn't get along very well. Now, but here's the thing I wanted to point out about mandatory Palestine. It's often said that the Jews took the land. No, they didn't. Mandate means the government that you have, the type of government you have in your home country, will also apply there. So therefore, Jews or anybody else could buy land in Palestine the way they would, let's say, want to buy a house from a bloke in Manchester. You have to, have a contract, get it registered, they'll pay the money, that sort of thing. They weren't just taken, they didn't take their land. Now, after 1948, that's a different story. Land was taken by force, by war, whatever. And I'm not going to get into that, at least not right now. So what I'm saying is that under mandatory Palestine, uh, Jews bought land from Arabs. I suppose Arabs also bought land from Arabs because that's the way things are in Britain. Their laws applied, and the British are very careful about having law and order. But still, there were extremists on both sides. The Arabs are like many of them kicked the Jews out, and there were Jews that said we don't want the British here, and probably not the Arabs either. And so things got really bad in the 1930s. Assassinations, killings, that type of thing, and the League of Nations, which kind of had the overall, not supervision, but overlooking of the mandatory Palestine and mandatory Libya and Syria, for that matter, tried a idea of making a partition between Arabs and Jews. They say, oh, we need a two-state settlement. Well, they tried that in 1939 with the League of Nations. The Jews didn't like it, but they said, well, better half aloof than not, loaf than not. Arabs wouldn't even discuss it. Once land is under the rule of Muslim authorities, it can never be alienated. I mean, they still want Spain back, which they lost in 1492. But at any rate, then the war came along, and the British focus was more on that. However, the British High Commissioner for Palestine was assassinated by a Jewish terrorist. After the war, then, of course, things really began to heat up, and just open conflict between Jews and Arabs. And the British in between just, could, I think they kind of favor the Arabs because, well, I think the evidence is pretty clear because the Arabs had the oil. I mean, what do the Jews have? They're shopkeepers, that sort of thing. They don't make very good soldiers. So, favor the Arabs. And Jews extremists, they weren't just Arab extremists either. Jewish extremists from the Irgun blew up the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. This was the center of British administration. And pretty soon the country was just unofficially split with barbed wire between Jewish and Arab neighborhoods. And the British said, no, if you're caught carrying a gun, the British don't like civilians carrying guns, you will face the death penalty. And there were a number of uh, Jewish extremists who were hanged in Acre Prison for carrying guns, even if they didn't use them, they had them. And there's a really ghastly situation where the Jewish extremists said, well, then you hang our guys, we're going to hang yours. And they kidnapped two British sergeants and hanged them. And when they went to cut them down, they exploded because they've been, booby trapped. So it was really a nasty situation on both sides. Um, Finally, the British they had two divisions in Palestine, eating their heads off. I mean, it cost all kinds of money, and so the British government under Labour government under Attlee said we just can't do this anymore. And so the British are pretty good at evacuations, Dunkirk and Gallipoli. So they basically on May 18th pulled out and put a nice show of it, the bagpipes swirling, the troops all square, stomping as they marched to the troop ships in Haifa Harbor. And then that was the end of the mandate, and that was the same day, of course, that the Jewish Authority claimed that no more Palestine. This is the independent state of Israel. But for 28 years, Britain ruled Palestine for better or for worse. So I think it's something we should realize. The point I want to make is the idea of land stealing or whatever did not happen under the. I mean, I'm sure there were swindles or whatever. I mean, that happens in any society. But basically, there were legal transfer of land from I say from everybody, A to B, Jews to Arabs. I mean, sorry, Arabs to Jews. I mean, there were Arab landowners, and Jews offered to pay for it. The Jewish Authority would sell bonds in the United States and Britain, places where you had a large Jewish population, to pay for buying land in Palestine and doing infrastructure, irrigation, that sort of thing. So it was kind of pretty much, although it was a civil war, which would come and go, it was still law and order for 28 years under a mandatory Palestine. Just thought you might like to know that. Well, thank you very much for listening. I'm Dr. Sandler, and this has been Stan the History Man. Thank you.